I had to fire the guy I hired to mow my lawn. He just didn't cut it. Today, I'm going to recap a 2023 action thriller film called Mojave Diamonds. The film begins with two siblings, Joe and Danny, spending their leisure time hunting in the wilderness. Following their excursion, Joe expressed to Danny his distaste for their brother Roy's constant mischief, often leading him to jail. Roy's violent tendencies, stemming from his profession as a free fighter, often got him into trouble. Yet Danny remained hopeful that Roy's true nature was kind, and that he'd eventually leave his risky job behind. We are then introduced to Roy, preparing for his next fight in the arena. Contrary to his siblings, Roy's demeanor is relaxed and carefree. Just moments before his match, he pauses to share an intimate moment with his girlfriend, Lisa, despite his awaiting audience. Leveraging his expertise from his time in the Special Forces, Roy easily dominated his opponent. After knocking him down, Roy approached Lisa to share another kiss. Unexpectedly, his adversary, not completely defeated, took advantage of the situation. Roy's oversight angered his employer, Julian, who was incensed over a $10 million loss due to Roy's blunder. Julian, a merciless mob boss, hadn't seen defeat in 4 years and assumed that Lisa was the reason behind Roy's declining performance. In a shocking turn, Julian executes Lisa in front of Roy. Subsequently, Julian transports Roy to a storage facility, revealing kilos of rare diamonds. He assigns Roy a task to deliver these diamonds between 2 locations, promising a $1 million payout if successful. The proposition baffled Roy, especially given that Julian had a myriad of well-equipped men for such tasks. Julian's reasoning was Roy's exceptional driving skills, the potential assistance of his ex-soldier brothers, and the significant financial setback Roy caused him. Julian further intimidated Roy with threats against his family. In a state of bewilderment, Roy tried reaching out to Joe, who, still harboring resentment, ignored the call. The following day, Danny, an active-duty soldier, grew anxious over his inability to connect with Roy. Danny made the choice to visit Joe at his residence. When he reached Joe's place, he noticed Joe engrossed in training his racehorses and tending to his pets. During their reunion, Joe confided in Danny that Roy had attempted to contact him the previous evening. However, still irritated with Roy's antics, Joe chose to ignore the call. Danny expressed disappointment in Joe's choice, speculating that Roy might be facing difficulties and possibly required assistance. Danny reminded Joe that despite Roy's shortcomings, he remained their sibling and deserved compassion and understanding. Unable to reach Joe by phone, Roy took the initiative to visit Joe's home. He was warmly greeted by his niece and sister-in-law upon his arrival. Being present at the house, Danny relayed Roy's arrival to Joe, who was preoccupied with his horses. He hoped for a familial reconciliation between the two. Yet Joe, being all too familiar with Roy's tendencies, expressed reluctance to engage with Roy, citing that Roy typically sought them out only when he found himself in a bind. Roy, sensing the tension, made up his mind to leave Joe's estate. Before departing, he extended an invitation to Danny to accompany him for the ensuing days. Considering their prolonged separation, Danny accepted the offer. However, he pressed Roy for more information regarding their journey. En route, Roy confessed his precarious situation, revealing he was tasked with transporting an invaluable asset, which, unbeknownst to Danny, was connected to a formidable crime syndicate. They would need to strictly adhere to the terms set by the mob leader. Their travels led them to an underground combat arena, managed by an acquaintance of Roy. There they witnessed an intense face-off between renowned fighters, Barney Boy and a colossal competitor known as Big Duke. The bout was decidedly in Big Duke's favor, with minimal resistance from Barney Boy. Having had a previous altercation with Big Duke, Roy stepped up to challenge the victorious fighter. The subsequent day, the duo, Roy and Danny, resumed their mission. Their next stop was a facility designated for the collection of a diamond consignment meant to be delivered to a specified location. At the diamond repository, they were met by Paulie, a trusted aide of Julian, who oversaw the security of the storage facility. Paulie briefed them on the diamond's discreet packaging within beverage bottles, a strategy devised to elude law enforcement scrutiny. After an exhaustive drive, the brothers paused at a local store, seeking some respite. They purchased sustenance to re-energize for the journey ahead. Shortly after their stop, a group of fully armed, masked individuals stormed the convenience store, executing a robbery. The shopkeeper tragically lost his life in a hail of gunfire from the assailants. Unknown to Roy and Danny at the time, the primary objective of these perpetrators was to snatch the diamonds in their possession. Perceiving a potential setup, Roy retaliated, firing shots at the attackers. Yet his efforts seemed fruitless. Despite the overwhelming odds, as a determined fighter, Roy was undeterred. Together with Danny, they pursued the robbers, commandeering a vehicle from the store's parking lot to aid in the chase. Growing increasingly wary, Danny sought answers from Roy about the nature of their cargo and the identity of their pursuers. Roy, however, evaded the queries, prioritizing the pursuit over everything else. The magnitude of adversaries ultimately compelled the brothers to abandon their chase. Yet again, Danny pressed Roy for clarity. Left with no alternative, Roy disclosed the truth. They were transporting diamonds, valued at a staggering $50 million, linked to a malevolent mob boss. That very night, Julian was informed of Roy's no-show at the prearranged rendezvous with the invaluable diamonds. Enraged, Julian jumped to the conclusion that Roy had betrayed him, absconding with the diamonds. However, a revelation emerges. The culprits behind the diamond heist were actually associates of Paulie, who had plotted to rob Julian and subsequently framed Roy and Danny. With their stolen vehicle rendered inoperable, the duo made their way on foot towards the city. Roy expressed the urgency to recover the diamonds to prevent Julian's wrath from descending upon Joe's family. The scene transitions to Joe, who, upon returning from errands, found his household devoid of his wife and daughter. Their disappearance was orchestrated by Julian, leveraging them as leverage contingent on Roy's mission success. Having reached a particular locality, Roy and Danny managed to establish communication with Joe, still reeling from the sudden vanishing of his loved ones. Roy broke the news. Julian was the mastermind behind the abduction. Roy pledged to Joe that he would expediently ensure the safe return of both his wife and daughter. Roy reached out to Julian to clarify the actual series of events. Julian, under the impression that Roy had double-crossed him, issued an ultimatum: return the diamonds within 2 days or face dire consequences for Joe's family. Danny, incensed by Roy's deception and the peril he had placed their family in, temporarily abandoned his brother. However, after collecting his thoughts, Danny returned, committed to seeking a resolution to their dire predicament. He vowed to aid Roy in exacting revenge on the gang. All the while, Detectives Johnson and Garcia covertly observed the brothers from a vantage point as they were probing into Julian's unlawful activities. Simultaneously, Joe, fueled by desperation, prepped to rescue his loved ones. Upon converging with his brothers, Joe's pent-up frustrations led to a physical confrontation with Roy. Detectives Johnson and Garcia maintained their surveillance, curious about the trio's next move. Later, Julian dispatched a disturbing photograph to Roy, displaying the captives. Recognizing the urgency, the three brothers strategized a plan to infiltrate Julian's base and retrieve the hostages. By the subsequent day, they descended upon Julian's stronghold. Armed with military prowess, Joe swiftly incapacitated several guards. Once the perimeter appeared secure, Joe and Roy ventured inwards for the rescue mission, while Danny provided sniper cover from afar. However, within the confines of the building, tensions escalated between Julian and Paulie. Paulie admitted orchestrating the diamond heist from Roy, driven by grievances towards Julian. He revealed that the diamond trade was rightfully his family's legacy, and he perceived Julian, the adoptive offspring of Paulie's uncle, as undeserving of the leadership mantle. Amid their heated exchange, the commotion outside diverted Paulie, allowing Julian a window to overpower him. A face-off ensued between Joe and Julian. As both discovered their firearms drained, they opted for hand-to-hand combat. Julian, possessing a more formidable stature, managed to subdue Joe. In a pivotal moment, Roy interceded, training his weapon on Julian. Yet, Julian's piercing shout caused Roy's hand to quiver. Julian seized the moment to deliver a brutal beating to Roy. In a twist, Paulie, previously incapacitated, sprang to his feet, unleashing a barrage of bullets towards both Joe and Julian. Believing he had mortally wounded them, Paulie instructed his subordinates to apprehend Roy. However, unbeknownst to him, Joe miraculously survived. Danny, unable to establish contact with his siblings, resolved to penetrate the base. Once inside, he reunited with Joe, who miraculously endured Paulie's assault, shielded by a bulletproof vest. Together, they launched a pursuit to rescue Roy from Paulie's clutches. In preparation for the looming confrontation, Danny reached out to his military associate, Jimmy, soliciting armament support to counter the mob's firepower. The scene transitions to Paulie, now at a heavily fortified location, holding Joe's family hostage. He coerced Roy into a brutal combat against his premier fighter, with the freedom of Joe's family hanging in the balance. Fatigued, Roy struggled against his formidable opponent, enduring relentless blows. Concurrently, Danny, Joe, and Jimmy made their entrance to the battleground. Utilizing his sniper expertise, Danny efficiently neutralized 2 of Paulie's sentinels with precision shots. Meanwhile, Roy mustered his remaining strength, turning the tide against his adversary and besting Paulie's champion. In unison, Joe, Danny, and Jimmy methodically eliminated Paulie's henchmen. In the climax, Joe successfully liberated his family and confronted a fleeing Paulie. But just as vengeance seemed imminent, law enforcement intervened. Swiftly thereafter, FBI agents descended upon the scene, detaining Paulie and shutting down his illicit empire. Special Agents Johnson and Garcia expressed their gratitude to the trio for their instrumental role in apprehending the culprits. As the narrative concludes, fractured ties between Joe and Roy began to mend. Roy chose to renounce his life as a free fighter, opting instead to assist Joe in managing their family's ranch. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.